Next up, we have Meda DeWitt, who is a Tlingit traditional healer. Her position is that she is the Interim Alaska Director for the Wilderness Society. Now, backstage, she edited down the bio that I originally had and told me to make jokes instead. I'm not kidding. But we're going to look to her for the jokes. No, we're going to look to her for her presentation. So please give a warm welcome to Meda.
Thank you. The joke is I'm Tlingit and I only get 20 minutes to speak. Gleka klenach Meda DeWitt, yuchat duasak, Tlingit klenach zeitzinak, yuchat duasak, nanyaina chatsati, kachari yadi chatsati, shtakin kwan, ayachat. And that's why I edited down the bio, so she didn't have to learn Tlingit in rapid time. So my presentation is going to be a little bit different because I have a lot of words, but I'm not going to say all the words to you that are on the slides. But I know that some people like more information, so please, if you would like to, pull out your phone and take pictures of any content or slides that may be interesting to you. And we're going to give gratitude to the Sichangu Dakota for hosting us in your sacred Black Hills. And please forgive me if I make any mistakes. It is not my intention. We have a different flow to this presentation. I'll be talking with different hats. As an Indigenous woman and a high caste woman in my clan and community, you take on a lot of hats and responsibilities. So we're going to talk about first my introduction. I said to you in Tlingit, my English name is Meda DeWitt. My Tlingit names are Tsetsinak and Katduklaat. My adopted Inupiaq name is Tigigiluk. My adopted Northern Cree name is Ba Seagull Spirit Woman. And my family comes from Shtakin Kwan, which this is at the headwaters of Shtakin Kwan at Shakes Glacier. Shakes Glacier and Shakes Wilderness is named after my family. I'm actually the great-grandchild of Chief Shakes VII, the last great Chief Shakes. So this is my homelands that we and I are responsible for. And if you go to the highest peak at the mouth of the river and you look out over, that is, as far as the eye could see, is where we're responsible. But as a Tlingit person, we're also responsible for the extension past that, because we have life who comes through and isn't bound by borders or human constructs. And so it's our charge to make sure that we host those salmon nations or whale nations or other beings as relatives and host them as well as we can. I am also the interim director for the Alaska office of the Wilderness Society, and soon I will be co-senior Alaska manager. We're very excited for that transition. I'm also the president and board chair for Yakutat Kwan, or Yaku.Kwan, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later in this presentation. So first, to introduce the Wilderness Society. The Wilderness Society is a conservation group in America. It's our oldest conservation group. It's been around almost 100 years. Actually, we're at its 90th anniversary this year, in the same way that we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Wilderness Act. The Wilderness Society actually helped, or was not just helped, they passed the Wilderness Act 60 years ago. And since then, there's been a lot of change and transition and growth that has happened. As you know, entities that don't change and grow, they go away. And the Wilderness Society is still going strong because they've chose to do their work and adapt, including the diversity, equity, and inclusion work internally. And so what that has led to is creating partners and learning how, or at least the desire of learning how, to be good relatives. That has led to a few programs as well as a lot of policy changes internally. So the wonderful thing about the Wilderness Society is the work with Indigenous people isn't just siloed to Starlin Miller and myself and a few people. It's actually the charge of all of our employees and partners to work with Indigenous people and to honor sovereignty. So Starlin Miller is the lead of our Native Lands Partnership. She is a lawyer and a really wonderful human being. And she helped to create the framework of working with tribal nations and Indigenous communities. This framework is inclusive of land acknowledgements and how our employees can do that the correct way, as well as 9 different position statements that we can be held to, and good communication and coordination with tribes. So as we look to these, and I'm just going to pause, I'm not going to read them, you can take pictures, but as we look to these, they're very instrumental in framing our work and being a guideline for us to look to, and how do we proceed forward, and what foundation can we stand on. If you would like to learn more about that, there's more information on our website. So I am the Imago. It was an initiative, and now it's program, actually, the Imago program at the Wilderness Society. The Imago initiative is a way to reimagine conservation. So I was hired in particularly to help indigenize conservation, which is no small feat. So thankfully they were already on their way to doing that, and had wonderful leadership. Peter Engst is here with us today. He helped lead the way and create relationships with the Blackfeet and the Bears Ears, and doing successful work there. So these partnerships are the most important thing, because historically, as you know, conservation and Indigenous people haven't always gotten along. And not only have they not gotten along, they're really part of the disenfranchisement from our lands. So we recognize that and want to acknowledge truth in history and change the way that we work. So Peter Engst hired Carlin Ichuak, and Carlin came up with the Imago initiative. And Imago stands for the imaginal cells that helps a caterpillar transform to a butterfly. He actually got that from Winona LaDuke. And it focuses on the Arctic refuge, working with the Indigenous people, the Inupiaq and the Gwich'in people, who have been there since time immemorial and who are the caretakers, along with the caribou, who are the residents of the Arctic refuge, and beyond those borders as well. This one always cracks me up, the time lapse that we did. This is actually from our first trip into the Arctic refuge on the Hula Hula River. We woke up at 5 a.m. to Robert Thompson yelling, "There's caribou, there's 100, no 200, 1,000s." He was so excited. And that was our first group. So I get to take people into the Arctic refuge for 8 to 9 days. There's absolutely no self-service. There's no connectivity whatsoever. And we literally are leave no trace. So we pop up and have a small community. Everybody, millionaires do dishes, right? The only people who don't have to do dishes are the elders. And we do 8 days of ceremony, talking circle, and imagine a future together that we can co-create for the best way forward. I get to bring people together that traditionally or historically may have been opposed to each other. So that's Sarah Barrio, who is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Regional Director, and Winona LaDuke. And that's like one of my favorite pictures. And we continue into the future. So the Imago Initiative is transforming and becoming more defined. But our future is really dependent on the people and the desire to move forward. As soon as nobody wants to do the work anymore, then we don't do the work anymore, because it's not prescriptive. A lot of times in Western groups, you have a goal, you get everybody to come together, and you make them go through a process, and they get to that goal. In an Indigenous facilitation methodology, the process is the goal. And whatever the outcomes are is the magic. And so it's a process of holding space and allowing people, like imaginal cells, to come apart and come back together in a different way. There's lots of crying that happens, letting go, tears of joy, lots of laughter, and all of our relatives visit us. This year was our 4th year, and we had bears and wolves and fox and caribou, and we saw fish and beautiful birds that had traveled thousands of miles. So through this work with Imago, I get to do very interesting things, and I'm going to have a short plug for our Sápa resolution that I'm hoping all of you will go and read about and learn what we have been working on. So as a group, we have been defining and redefining wilderness. I'm not going to go over how it's been defined because we've heard a lot of that today and yesterday on the historic harms done by the way that wilderness was defined. And so we went through a process with over 15 members from around the world to take a deep dive into the history of wilderness and how do we redefine it in a way that is in partnership with Indigenous people, that the reality is the Indigenous people can accept that as a definition and accept it as real. And so we have redefined it. It is not perfect. It is in the making and it's ever evolving. But I would ask you to read and support Resolution 1 so that we can change the way that wilderness is defined and enacted across the world. TWS staff, we have Indigenous staff, we have about 8 Indigenous staff, and they all were able to participate in creating language and thought around this resolution. We'll pause for a picture. But it's really getting to that core of relationality, that core of Indigenous lifeways, that core of thriving ecosystems that are connected and supported and valued. If you'd like to find it, there's the website that you can go and look for the resolution to read more. There's also a position paper that supports the language and process of the thinking. So I'm also here, and actually I was going to just speak on this originally. However, I got the news that the Wilderness Society is an endorser of the resolution. I got that Monday morning. So the Wilderness... That is no small feat. We had to bring together a working group of colleagues inside the Wilderness Society to review the resolution line by line. And thankfully, we had the work already done by the Native Lands Partnership and their framework, where we could go and say, yes, we agree, yes, we agree. And where are we lacking? None of my colleagues said no because they didn't want to do it. The only thing they said is, we need to up our game. And so that's why I'm proud to be able to represent the Wilderness Society here today. So changing hats. Remember I said lots of hats. So changing hats, I'm going to talk about some of the Indigenous perspectives on climate change in Alaska. And this really comes from being a traditional healer, learning from our elders, being in community, and also, as the president for Yakutat-Kwan, we shareholders had to create grassroots organizing, a grassroots shareholder coalition to gather proxies and force an annual meeting, and we did a board sweep. We replaced the entire board because they were going to clear cut our barrier islands and clear cut over our traditional village sites and clear cut over our sacred sites for money. And we won, and we won the court case that supported it, and we have ended clear-cutting, the last village corporation that was clear-cutting in Southeast Alaska. So Wilson Justin is an elder that we work with. He is prolific at teaching. He will teach anyone who will want to listen authentically. And he talks about how climate change started at contact with colonization, and it created the imbalance in our relationship. He said the elders in his region first saw something big, white and smooth, and they thought it was the sails of a ship, and then later it was determined it was paper. And in the way that our cosmology works, the Papist Bull, the Doctrine of Discovery, all of those papers are actually black magic. And so it changed our foundation. And I added this in here. It's gratuitous because people keep putting us in between Hawaii and California, which are beautiful places. But we don't live there. And sometimes I wish I do when it's minus 40. But we live up higher, and we're 20% of the United States landmass. There's 229 tribes out of the 567 BIA registered tribes in the United States. We have 2 different main cultural groups. We have 11 different cultural groups. We have 22 different dialectical variants, and we have 2 language isolates that don't occur anywhere else on the world. We have 6 different distinct ecoregions that host life that the rest of the world loves. When they say birds migrate to Alaska, they hatch there. Those birds are Alaskan. They come to visit you and love you up. What we are seeing is sea level rise at a tremendous rate. We're experiencing change at 4 times the rest of the world. We are literally the canaries in the coal mine. They're expecting to see 90% of our communities affected, 183 communities, most of those Alaska Native. This is the land that we're anticipating to be affected by sea level rise. And it's very difficult. If you want to find out how difficult it is to move a community, Estelle Thompson is here, and she's a voice for her community. Ask her, she will tell you. So adaptation is an indigenous thing. The reason why I get to speak in the story I'm going to tell you is because the Tlingit people are an ancient people. And we have stories since the ending of the last ice age. And my grandmother shared stories with me from her grandmother. And originally, there's 2 different groups that actually came together to form the Tlingit nation. One of them were those people who put the statues and populated the Pacific Rim. They were already living on the coast of Alaska. So if anybody tells you that we came over the land bridge, it's not true. We know where we came from. We know who our relatives are. There were people living on the coast of Alaska. And when there was pockets of areas on the other sides of these different ice features, and they depressed the land, so there was other land that was above ground, or sea level. And so these pockets of areas, there's the Dene people, the original Dene people that had migrated up to Alaska. And some of them didn't like how cold it was, so they migrated back down. And they're the Navajo and the Apache. Those are my cousins. So for the people who stayed, eventually the climate changed and it became disrupted, and there wasn't any food, and there was sickness and starvation, and they knew they had to leave their very beautiful, very sacred, very beloved place where they lived. And they had to go under a glacier in a river. They did not know if the glacier went all the way down and if they would survive. But the whole community could not travel over. And so eventually 2 old women volunteered to go under the glacier, and they were prepared to pass away out of love for their community. So they went, and the community said goodbye. And when they said goodbye, the cry song, that's over 20,000 years old, was way, way, he, ya, hey, 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 he, ya, hey. With great heavy grief, they went under the glacier. 2 young men, the strongest men, went over the glacier to the points to see if they made it to the other side. And the women sang the whole way. Way, way, he, ya, hey. And they just kept going, and they made it. They made it to the other side of the glacier. And the 2 young men saw that. And so the whole community got into the canoe, and they went under the glacier to the coast. And there was people there. That's our raven moiety. And they received them, they fed them, they clothed them. But after a period of time, there was so much pain and grief left in their hearts that they realized they had to create ceremony for the lifting of grief. And so that was where our most important law of raven and eagle supporting each other comes from, our oldest law, and where our ku'ich comes from, the lifting of spirit, the spirit. And so they hosted and potlatched and danced and sang and fed them, and they made a special song. And the song translates, Shadu Kla Yesh Tana Henlin shared the meaning with me. She's Shuknahari, she's the same as my grandfather's people. And it translates to come out of grief, come out and live again. And to live again means to hunt and fish and laugh. And so they would sing, Ya ha hey, ya ha, hini sa, ya, awa, ya, awa, ya ha hey, ya ha, hini sa, ya, awa, ya. And what they found was a transformation. They transformed into a new culture. There was hope. There was life. And right now, that is what we are called to do, is to transform. And to do this, according to our traditions, you have to have a rites of passage, either physical journey or internal journey. But there is nowhere else to physically migrate to. There is no other planet. There's no other place. This is our sanctuary. This is our home. This is our church. This is our everything. This is the way that we connect to Creator, is through the Mother. And so the evolutional journey that we have to take is internal. We've heard people into the heart and into spirit. We have to connect to spirit again, and we only do that authentically through the care of each other and the care of Mother Earth in all of our relations. So the message that I want you to take is that we're not going back. We are not going to reverse climate change. However, we are going to transform. We are going to do our duty as good human beings, and we are going to shepherd our relatives through these changes. And I know, because I've seen the signs that the elders told me that were going to come, one of which some of my friends here from Alaska know, is the return of the white raven to Alaska. That happened this winter. along with many other signs. So this is not the time to give up or feel forlorn. This is the time to fill yourself with joy and all of the energy and effort that you will ever need to move forward. Because we will be successful, but it will take all of us working together. And it will take joy, because we cannot create a good future out of pain and suffering. We are taught if we want to create something that's everlasting, we have to create it with love and with joy. So to help lift our spirits a bit, I'm going to ask everybody to stand up. I'm going to teach you how to anti-laugh. You got to plant your feet, put your hands on your hips, and lean way back and laugh to the sky. Okay? Beautiful. I didn't even have to prompt you to laugh. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. That was fun. Okay, one more time. And then if somebody's next to you that you love, you smack them real hard. Ganesh cheese, Ganesh cheese, Ganesh cheese, hasha kakao.